State governors have to come to the table and be honest about taking care of this thing. Why should even federal government be involved in funding primary education? Why should it be? When funds are appropriated, when state governments are asked to give their counterpart, or when federal governments or World Bank, why should we even be taking money from World Bank to fund our primary education in this country? We embezzle the money. It's shameful. Go to see secondary schools, go to see primary schools. Not in one state, in all the states of this country. But every time we sit down, we go and look at reports upon reports every time, and we are not doing anything about it. I will recall when they said in the northern Nigeria, the Almajiri system, the schools that we have, they are going to, the convention, they are going to bring them up and put them together under the conventional system. They did as if it's going to work. Budget was made for all those purposes and nothing was done. Today, it's not about school feeding that will make children to go to school. No. When you give a contractor and he's giving them Indomie and one egg, and you think that is what will make them to go to school, go to China and see little things that attract children to school. And those things that are attracting those children to school are also giving those children some kind of insight on how to innovate. This is what we need. We said we should ensure free education, basic education. That is primary school education. In 2024, we are talking of tens of thousands of little children out of school. This is very shameful. So I think this report is not enough for us to tackle this issue. We must address these things head on. State governors have to come to the table and be honest about taking care of this thing. Why should even federal government be involved in funding primary education? Why should it be? So, Mr. President, sir, this report, I believe if we should follow it up, take all the inputs that a lot of senators have made here and challenge ourselves to seeing that this works. Because if you don't give that foundation, if you don't give that basic foundation, our educational system will be rubbished. As it is today, you see somebody with master's degree, tell him to write one statement, he cannot do it. So what foundation are we putting? This is my contribution.
How did he get the master?
Ago, Bill Clinton, former president of America, had to come to Nigeria. What was he coming to do? He was concerned about the plight of out-of-school children. He particularly said, we are sitting on time bomb. Today we are already seeing the time bomb addressing these issues. Some people will say it is from federal, some people will say from the state. Coming as a former governor, I think it is from the states. I say this because of out of experience, sir. Federal government have done everything, a lot. They have done a lot. When we attempted Almajiri school, taking back children, compulsorily forcing them to go to school, it ended with a religious dimension, and it died down. They are back to Almajiri streets. They introduced agile program, especially for the female ones. Only very few states, even with the World Bank funds, are bringing counterpart funds. I take a dimension from the last one that we did. Mr. President, you have done your best, even commenting every time about actions on local government funds. Today, we are still seeing a different thing, like they mentioned. At one time, when we were governors, we recommended to the president, we say you must take some compulsion. You must do some compulsory measures. What was the time when he attempted? President Buhari attempted one. When parish funds came, parish what do they call it, parish fund scheme. He made it a priority that all those that have not accessed the UBEC funds in respect to education, in your state, it was first of all a priority. They will remove it and access compulsory for you to go and address those issues. Then the remaining balance, they will tell you, come and collect. Today, sir, we have a lot of certain things, even without parish club. We have subsidy palliatives. We have so much funds going to the states, but they are not addressing the issue of education. Mr. President should also take bold steps to take a decision. Any palliative that is going to a state, and that state has challenges of educational funding, especially accessing SUBE funds, what they will do is to say, okay, first priority, we are taking this to access your SUBE fund. Go and address the issue of out-of-school children. Otherwise, we'll continue to do the same thing. We'll introduce so many measures and it will go in vain. We are looking forward to one day that this country will agree with Mr. President that direct funding will go to local governments so that they will address this matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm alone, I represent Yobe North. Mr. President, I want to make some comments on the recommendations. These comments are of general nature. I believe that the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria has no national policy on out-of-school children. Mr. President, the National Council on Education must have a clearly spelled out national policy on out-of-school children. We have 20 million out-of-school children, and in fact, could be more. And this is a huge challenge to not only our educational sector, but our national security, Mr. President. So we should, when we consider the recommendations, we should urge the National Council on Education, where the Federal Ministry of Education, all the states, ministries of education, and the FCT are present to have a clearly defined national policy on out-of-school children. The second thing, Mr. President, in the recommendations is recommendation 5, where that's on page 7, where our committee, and I must commend the committee for a very good job, is talking about the release of funds for dealing with this issue. I think based on what we should know better, we should appropriate. We should not leave this matter in the hands of the Federal Ministry of Education alone. Our committee on basic education particularly should engage. And then in the 2025 appropriation bill, something tangible, something meaningful and reasonable and significant should be made available. Lastly, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we are talking of feeding, the school feeding program. I, from my experience, and of course those who are in the 9th National Assembly, would tell you that that program was abused, grossly abused. Even when COVID kept everybody in their residences, expenditures were incurred on feeding people who were not in schools. That means that the program is prone to abuse and manipulation. So we need to look at how to make it foolproof if we must continue with school feeding program. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
But I think under this democratic setup, there must be a change of ideas, and we must have the courage. Mr. President, you were once a governor. From my own little assessment, and from what I have seen so far, we can sit here and discuss all the problems. I think we know what the problems are. But I think the implementation is where the problem is. Mr. President, a politician, for example, let's say a governor, for example, would rather invest money in building bridges, roads, something he can show. Is a major problem. Education, investment in education is not something you see immediately. The gestation period for investment in education takes a long time. You can invest in education today, you probably won't see the value until 10 years, 5 years from day of investment. So in our setup, political setup, especially someone that is looking for second term, he wants to invest in projects that he can show immediately. Mr. President, that will not solve our education problem. We must get the courage to invest in education, regardless of what people will say. To give you an example, in Niger State, when I was governor, we have 56 boarding schools. We have schools without toilets, schools without dining hall, schools without fence. You can't get good leaders out of system like this. We all came out of good system. In some cases, we've lost students due to lack of toilets. They have to go to the forest at night to ease themselves, and they're bitten by snakes. So what I decided was to not to renovate, but to start rebuilding the schools, which cost a lot of money, Mr. President. A lot to fence and do toilets, build dining halls, fix their roofs, was costing over $1 billion for each school. We didn't have the money. But thank God we're able to do 9. And if that was a program that continued, government after government, maybe one day. But you see, the maintenance culture must continue. Because if you renovate a school today, because there are children, if you don't keep on the maintenance, after 1 year, you go back to square one. So, Mr. President, in short, this is a very serious problem that I think the federal and state governors need to sit down, forget re-election for now, invest in education. Nobody will see it, but in future, you see it. I can't imagine a school where girls, all girls school cannot go to toilet, they have to ease themselves in front of their dormitory for fear of being bitten by snakes. Imagine the health hazard and the stench smell. So, Mr. President, I agree with all the intervention, but I think our conscience should judge us. Anybody that is in position today, I believe, was in school 30, 40 years ago, where in some cases, even in school, we're giving money for train. So, Mr. President, that's my intervention. I think we need to do more. I think there should be more discussion, roundtable discussion between the subnationals and the federal government. Even the issue of UBEC, Senator Lalong mentioned, is true. Some states have not accessed their UBEC funds for many years. In some cases, when they access, they divert it for something else. So I think there must be a robust discussion between the subnationals and the federal government to address this problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
I looked at the